The Dukes of Dice are brought to you by Meeple Realty and Tasty Minstrel Games. Check out all their awesome products at meeplerealty.com and playtmg.com.
Welcome to the Duchy. It's time for another episode of the Dukes of Dice podcast, a proud member of the Dice Tower Network.
Coming to you from the Duchy in the Duke City, Albuquerque, New Mexico, it's the Dukes of Dice, a podcast about board, card, and occasionally role-playing games. Today, the Dukes are joined once again by locals Jeremy and Nick. We review CMON Games' Masmorra, Dungeons of Arcadia. Then we look back at a review of Terra and our Dukes Double-Take. Finally, we discuss completionism in board games. And now, the Dukes of Dice. Hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast. This is Sean.
And Nick. And Jeremy.
Welcome back, guys. How's it going?
Pretty awesome. It's early in the morning, Saturday.
So welcome back, both of you, to episode 133, which we're naming The Morra, the Merrier, thanks to Steve O'Rourke, the name father. Great title there, because we're talking about buying a bunch of stuff and Masmorra, Dungeons of Arcadia. If you want to help name our episodes every week, you can go on over to our Board Game Geek Guild number 2008, where we put up our Dukes on Deck post, where we talk about what's going to happen in the upcoming episode, and everyone can kind of pitch in, as you'll hear throughout the episode. But we'll give you our runners-up at the end of the episode. A little bit of show business first. The day that this episode drops, the Golden Geek Awards, the 11th annual 2016 Golden Geek Awards, will be ending at 11:59 Central Standard Time. So if you are listening to this the day that this episode drops, on the Monday, March 6th, then make sure you go over there and you vote for your favorite board games and hopefully your favorite podcasts. And if you would like to include the Dukes of Dice amongst them, that would be fantastic. You could actually go in and kind of rank everyone how you prefer. Have you guys done that by any chance?
I have, in fact, voted for the Dukes of Dice.
Oh, hooray. 16th, right?
Last place, of course. I also put in my vote, but, that's confidential.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, I don't want to... I'll be violating some sort of federal law, I think, if I push you guys too much. So, but yeah, definitely go check it out. And once again, thanks everyone for nominating us. It's amazing to be nominated 2 years in a row. Very, very excited about that. Also, we do have a Patreon campaign. It's patreon.com/Dukes of Dice, where we have a bunch of amazing Patreon supporters that help with equipment costs and hosting costs and all sorts of stuff. We have a brand new Patreon backer, Mark Spector. Just want to give Mark a shout out and say thank you very much for supporting the Dukes. And if you want to help out, feel free to head on over to patreon.com/Dukes of Dice. Hey, have you guys, by any chance, seen any of the YouTube content that we've been putting up in the last couple weeks?
I have. I've looked at some of the YouTube first plays and quick looks that you've done.
Yeah.
They're definitely pretty cool. I like the new studio as it's come together.
Yeah, definitely. So we did Rum and Bones, Second Tide. Did you get that, Jeremy?
Yeah, I also backed Rum and Bones.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Have you played it yet?
I haven't played it, but I did watch your unboxing.
We did Hero Realms deck box. Then we also did, we're doing this kind of monthly recap that goes through all of the Dukes of Dice productions, including on the podcast side and the video production side, but we actually renamed it Dukes Digest. I put out the call to get some help naming it, and Bill Simone, another Patreon supporter, suggested Dukes Digest. So we just put out the February Dukes Digest. So if you want kind of a recap of everything the Dukes have done in February, you can go check that out. But yeah, I think that does it for some show business. Gents, let's talk about some board games, shall we?
Yeah, so I thought I'd get us started off by talking about a recent play of Cry Havoc, which is a game that came out from Portal last year at Gen Con. It's a pretty cool area control game that includes some card hand management aspects. And so you play cards during your turn to take different actions, which include movement of your troops, recruiting new troops, and building buildings that you can activate to do some nasty things to your opponents. I was playing as the machines. Our buddy Chris Holm was playing as the Pilgrims, and he totally mopped the floor with the rest of us.
Oh boy!
Yeah.
What do you mean? So the Pilgrims are designed to not fight in combat. Do you just mean he beat you points wise considerably, or he was aggressive?
He got that engine going, and he had just a really incredible way of generating points, and then we kind of manipulated each other in the last round. Cameron was playing too as the Trogs kind of opened up opening, and Chris slipped in there and took control of basically almost every zone on the map. It was pretty
wow. That's pretty nuts.
Yeah, and as the machines, I feel pretty bad because I was, killing people from the sky and stuff, and it didn't work out for me.
How does Cry Havoc rate for you amongst the various kind of hybrid dudes on the map Euro Ameritrash games?
Well, I really like those kinds of games, and as far as where it rates in those, it's definitely in my top 5 of those kinds of games.
Okay.
So I think I'd probably put Blood Rage above it, but I really enjoy Cry Havoc. I haven't played Kemet yet, so.
Oh, you still haven't played Kemet?
No, I need to get it to the table.
There was an opportunity this last Wednesday. I brought my copy. Chris wanted to play it. I know Max and I think Cameron and then another buddy, Matt, they all got to play my copy of Kemet. I was a little jealous.
If I'd been there that night, maybe I could have gotten.
That would have been good. I think you would have enjoyed it.
I highly recommend using Sean's copy. It makes it a ton easier with the extra playing aids. So having a player aid printed out for each player makes Kemet so much easier.
Oh yeah, it's an absolute must.
That was Cry Havoc by Portal Game.
All right, so this last Wednesday, I got a chance to play a game called Dead Man's Draw, and that's by Mayday Games, Seth Hyatt, the designer. So it plays 2 to 4 players. I hadn't played this before. It came out via Kickstarter in 2015. So it's a press your luck card game. It seems similar to Port Royale at first to me. Definitely thematically, it's kind of a Dead Man's Chest, Pirates of the Caribbean sort of theme, where you're pressing your luck, flipping cards off of the top of the deck, trying not to get 2 matching suits of cards. Where the twist is each card suit has a special ability that occurs when it flops down. So if you have, for example, the Tentacle, when that flops down, it requires you to press your luck twice more. When the Oracle flops down, it allows you to take a peek at the next card in the deck before you choose to press your luck. So that's true with all the suits. Now, how the scoring works in the game is as you press your luck and stop and take the cards that are out there, they join your tableau. Your tableau is scored by the highest number of each suit you have in your tableau at the end of the game. So pretty simple rule set to explain, and as long as you have the player aids that come with it that describe what each suit does as they flop, it's a pretty quick teach. I think an MSRP is for $20. You can find it for between $14 to $18 online now. I think it's going to be one that gets added to my collection.
All right. Yeah, I'm interested to try that.
I mean, if you like Port Royal or other kind of flop cards, press your luck games, it seems an even easier sort of setup and teach to get to the table than Port Royale is.
Okay. All right. Very cool.
Again, that was Dead Man's Draw.
So for the last Duke State night in a while, for a while, I should say, because Raquel just had some ankle surgery and she's going to be out of commission for a while. So I don't know that we're going to be doing our Friday night Duke State night anymore. But the last one, we got to play Battle Cry, thus rounding out my Commands and Colors games. I've now played every single Commands and Colors game. So Ancients, Napoleonics, Memoir, what's the one I really like? Battle Lore. So this rounded out the plays. And this is the Civil War one. And this came out in the late 90s. I think it's Avalon Hill. And we played Empire's copy. I said, hey, I want to get the full experience. And boy, it was kind of crazy. I think this is probably my least favorite of all of the Commands and Colors games, which is interesting because I wouldn't call myself a Civil War buff by any means, but I've certainly read a decent amount of books about the Civil War from the political side, the military side, things like that. So I enjoy Civil War history, but there were some swinginess in the command cards. So if you don't know anything about the Commands and Color system, basically it's pretty simple. There are 3 sections on this shared map. There's left, center, and right. And to kind of represent the fog of war, to kind of represent the disruption in the ability to communicate from command to the actual troops, you have this command card system where you're drawing these cards that let you activate a certain number of troops in either the left flank, the right flank, or the center. So maybe it might say activate 1 troop in the left or activate 3 in the center. And the frequency of these cards are different, so you may not always be getting the good cards, the best cards, right? But then in addition to that, there are some special cards, which there's one, for example, that says activate all of your units. All of your units. So let's think about that for a second. You could draw one card that says activate 1 unit on the left flank. Or you could draw a card that says activate all 12 of your units. That is a huge variance. And for the life of me, I don't recall seeing this in Memoir. I know it's not in Memoir. I know it's not in Battle Lore. I don't think I've seen it in the Commands and Colors Ancients or Napoleonics. But that is a huge difference. I mean, monumental. my dice were being very nice to me that night, right? So that's one of the main combat resolution is you're just rolling some dice. You're trying to match symbols to the target. Very easy system. But the card draw, I was getting normal cards. Activate 2, activate 3, activate 1. That's fine. But Raquel was getting activate all your units in this section or just activate all your units. And it was crazy. She was able to just completely outmaneuver me and just destroy me. So it was a normal commands and colors game, but the card distribution or the card abilities was just crazy. So I'm not certainly going to go looking for a copy of it between Commands and Colors Ancients and Napoleonics. Because Napoleonics, you're only off about 40 years there? 50 years there, give or take. So, yeah, Battlecry. I'm a big fan of the system, big fan of Richard Borg as a designer, but was not a fan of Battlecry. So, yeah, that's Battlecry, I guess, from Avalon Hill.
All right, our next play that I got in with Nick actually was Terraforming Mars. We were at Empire for Cardboard Lunch Fridays, and our buddy Jason dropped in, and we got in a 3-player game, and it was one of the more interesting plays I've ever had of the game.
So Terraforming Mars is one of my favorite games, and this was definitely an outlier in terms of how the flow of the game went, right?
Yeah, so it's 3 players. We've all played before. We even started with some production, and it took 3.5 hours.
Which is ridiculous
Wow.
for 3 players who played that game before.
Yeah.
What kind of happened was we got a lot of cards in the very beginning that burned off everybody's plants, and we were kind of attacking everyone equally in that way, and there was just no oxygen. I've never seen the oxygen be the last metric for the game end to come up, and it was sat at 0 until we had all 9 oceans, and the temperature was at 8 centigrade.
So just to understand the way we played with a draft variant for each card draw each turn, where you draw your 4, you pick 2, pass 2, and then you pass 1, and then you have your 4 cards to buy from each turn. So we played with that.
Sorry, damn it. Do that again there.
So we played with a draft variant for the card draw each turn. So you draw your 4 cards, you pick 2, you pass 2, then you receive the 2 from the person next to you, you pick one of those and pass 1. So now you have 4 cards to choose from to buy. So that's not a full pick 1 and pass, a little bit more abbreviated, but it did cause a little bit of AP. And I think because of that, we ended up drafting more cards that dealt with points and card engine. So we did play with the corporate era cards in there. Like Jeremy mentioned, we started with 1 production on all of the 6 tracks, which should make the game go quicker.
Oh yeah, big time.
But man, having the heat fully done and the oceans all in place and no forests on the map, no oxygen at all, it was pretty odd.
Yeah, that's really weird.
Yeah, and when I drew my first corporation cards, I'd gotten the plant company and the major bankers.
Yeah.
I ended up choosing the major bankers, and if I hadn't and I'd gone with plants, I would have been totally destroyed.
Oh yeah, the other thing that was worth mentioning, they all came up too. So the copy at Empire Board Game Library has the promo cards that came with it, but I think there are 6 copies of that one promo card in that set.
Yeah, I've had this discussion with Roy before, how there's only supposed to be 1 copy of the promo card.
So in that game, I got 5 of that card, which happens to destroy plants. So I think it raises the temperature, destroys plants, and it only costs 10 for an asteroid. So a good card. However, I ended up with 5 of them, and I ended up playing all 5. I mean, it was the right thing to do because they were from a strategy perspective, but man, it ended up just keeping everyone's plants down at nothing.
That's really weird. One thing I noticed, though, is that with Terraforming Mars, at least, every game can feel very different. Like, the map is going to look very different. You have one game where it's almost completely covered in forests and one where you have very, very few forests.
So I was figuring that we were going to end up having to find some other way to build oxygen other than forests. There's a couple other mechanisms where you can raise the oxygen level. And that happened a couple of times, but not until the very end of the game. So what that caused is a lot of the cards that we had in our hands that required a minimum oxygen level didn't get played either at all or till the very end of the game. So something that requires 2% oxygen, you'd think you'd be able to play pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But in fact, was held in people's hands for the entire game. A very non-standard play of that game. Again, that was Terraforming Mars, and we played it at 3 players.
Okay, very cool. The last one I'm going to talk about is Tokaido, and I haven't actually played this in person in quite some time. I actually have been playing online with some Dukes of Dice Patreon supporters on Board Game Arena. But then Wednesday night, I was crippled by allergies. I mean, I was feeling terrible. My eyes were super droopy. I could barely keep one of them open. And we were getting some extra plays of Masmorra in, and then it was kind of early in the night still, but I was just like, I'm not feeling it. I think I need to go home. I had Merrier with me, and she doesn't get out to Empire much, so I know that it would have kind of been a bummer to just leave. So we pulled out Tokaido.
I mean, you did look like warmed over death, Sean.
Yeah, no, it was pretty terrible. Even now, I'm not feeling so hot, but compared to Wednesday night, I'm perfectly fine. But yeah, Wednesday was pretty rough. But we did play Tokaido, which is Antoine Bauza design. This is from Funforge and Passport Games, I believe. And this is an interesting, you keep taking turns while you're behind the rest of the pack type game. So think of Patchwork or Glenmore. And what you're doing is trying to take a leisurely tour of Japan. You're trying to eat the best food. You're trying to buy souvenirs from villages, enjoy the therapeutic nature of hot springs, and paint panoramas of these beautiful vistas. That's the goal of the game. And so every time you move, you're taking an action. Variations on set collection is kind of what it amounts to, with kind of different rules for each type of set collection. So let's say that I am really focused on getting souvenirs, because for every different type of souvenir I get, I'm getting more points as a set. So I need to make sure I get to go to villages as often as I want. So it might be that the next village is 3 spots ahead. If I want to just jump to the village, I'm giving up the ability to go back to those previous spots. And I'm potentially letting the other players have more opportunities, more actions behind me, because they can just kind of move up behind me before finally jumping ahead. So it's an interesting tension. Do I jump ahead for the spot I desperately want, or do I just take, get incremental advantages taking actions as they come up? For me, I prefer the expansion. So when we played in person, Nick, you were in that game on Wednesday. We played without the expansion. My online plays recently have been with the expansion, and the expansion adds additional choices at each stop.
You're talking the Crossroads expansion?
Crossroads expansion. I really enjoy the expansion a lot, and I think that's probably my preferred way to play it.
So I haven't played it with the expansion. I think without the expansion, it makes it very easy to carry on a conversation and sort of play this family weight game, because your decisions you don't have very much decision per turn. So there's an advantage to playing it without the added decision matrix if you want to have something that's very light, if you're acting like warmed over death that day.
Sure.
That's not a bad way to go.
Have you played Tokaido, Jeremy?
Yeah, I've gotten a single play in, and I enjoyed it, and something I like to get back to the table, but for whatever reason, my wife wasn't really into it, so I haven't picked that game up yet.
Huh.
Just one more thing on that game, Tokaido. I got a chance to demo the app, the Android and iOS app for it when I was at Gen Con last year, and the app looks absolutely gorgeous. So really looking forward to seeing that come out. That might be a really great sort of casual on the phone waiting for an appointment or something.
All right, well, that's Tokaido, and that's going to do it for our recent plays. Oh, hold on 1 second. We're receiving an incoming call. Who is this here?
Hello, friends. It's me, the Shogun.
We're visited by the friendly Shogoth?
That's right.
Friendly Shogoth, you sound like you're really far away. Are you calling from some alternate dimension?
Yes, it's a dimension called Vietnam. That's about it.
You sounded unsure about the name of your dimension there. That was a little odd, Friendly Shogoth.
I'm on vacation, but part of the vacation is not knowing where the I am. Oh, wait. Podcast.
Well, that'll get a bleep. Well, you're out of practice, Friendly Shogoth, knowing what's appropriate for podcasts and what's not.
I'm on vacation.
Does that vacation include vacation from being on the Dice Tower Network, apparently?
Apparently.
I don't know what time it is there, but has there been some recent alcohol use?
Maybe.
Well, it's close to 1 a.m. your time?
1:30.
Oh, wait, you're breaking character? It's just now Alex?
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay.
Yep.
So how's your special friend?
We parted ways. She had to go elsewhere.
Okay.
That's so sad.
We're gonna meet up again, but not for another few days.
Oh, that's exciting.
Inquiring minds are definitely interested.
Well, keep inquiring.
We need a whole separate Patreon Slack channel. So for our Patreon Slack channel, there's the Wandering Duke Alex sub-thread, and now we need another thread that's, Wandering Duke Alex's romantic encounters.
Or maybe it's the romantic encounters of the friendly Shoga?
That sounds like a really bad Netflix original series.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, not good. So wait, who did the Albuquerque this week? Nick, did you do it? Jeremy, did you do it?
No, it was Sean.
No, it was me.
He won't let us do it.
I don't trust anyone.
He had that sort of slits in his eyes, evil look.
Nick, let me hear one.
Let's do coming to you from the Duchy in the Duke City, Albuquerque, New Mexico. Let's hear it.
Coming to you from the Duchy in the Duke City, Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Coming from you in the Duchy.
Coming from you.
This is why I don't do the intro. So I'm just going to leave it at that. I'm done. I'm even from here. That's terrible.
Yeah.
So, any opportunities to play games, Alex, since last we talked?
I actually did get some.
Yeah.
I did get to play in some games recently.
Did you go to a game night, a listener's game night, right?
That's correct.
Oh.
In Singapore, went to a shop called Battle Bunker. Nice little spot in a mall in Singapore. Although Singapore is about 80% malls, so yeah. Fun times. Good little group. It was a Monday night game night, and got in some Winner's Circle, which I've already played a couple times. This was the old edition where you can't tell the horses apart. But my new play got in Jiraku, which is stellar.
Yeah.
Sean, I'm jealous that you have a copy of this.
Well, you can have a copy too. In fact, our listeners can have a copy at some point because Tasty Minstrel Game is going to be bringing this over at some point soon.
Oh, well, I wasn't intending to do any sponsorship stuff, but
Good job.
Yeah, I guess I helped out with that.
You've stumbled into success.
So I've talked about Jiraku before, but it's basically a trick-taking game, but also area control game.
Yes, perfect description.
Thank you. I'm still in practice.
The trick-taking part of it is less important than you think.
Disagreement.
What?
No, leading's important. Nah, anyway, yeah. But what's really, I think the coolest part about the game, though, is the way that scoring different regions changes from round to round.
Right, you're trying to shuffle everyone into Kyoto,
Yeah.
which is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's pretty sweet.
So yeah, you should enter into that contest, guys, because it's a good game.
No, I didn't mean a contest. I just meant that Tasty Minstrel is importing it because it doesn't have U.S. distribution currently.
Oh, are we doing a contest or
No,
no?
we're not. You just said contest.
You just
Yeah,
made
I
stuff
know.
up.
And I was saying I just said it's not a contest.
Well, it should be.
When the
okay.
game actually hasn't been imported and come over yet, it's tough
Yes.
to do a contest.
When TMG actually publishes it, I will see if I can arrange a contest.
Yeah, get on that, Sean.
Okay.
You're already busy doing 90% of the work. Like, set up more contests. Like, give back, Sean.
Yes. Thank you.
So, Alex, how is the Happy Salmon touring the world going?
So it got off to a hot start. Like, I got Happy Salmon in Sweden. No. I keep mixing these up. It's not Sweden. It's Denmark.
They're different countries, Alex, okay?
And in Thailand. But
Nope.
I have not broken it out since, unfortunately.
Now, you are still talking about a game, not a euphemism for something?
Yes.
Okay, just checking.
But
We're
now
Blazing Saddles fans. Excuse me while I whip this out.
But let's pretend we are talking about the euphemism. Now describe how that's been going. No, I'm just kidding.
Well,
So what else of note has happened in the last week, Alex? What other exciting stuff?
well, I'm currently calling you from Vietnam as the Friendly Shogun happens to be here. I don't know how that happened, but it did. By the way, me and the Friendly Shogun are actually engaged now.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah, I think it's nice.
Is that legal in Vietnam?
No, I'm calling you from Dalat, Vietnam, which is an old French colonial town. Beautiful strawberry farms nearby, flowers, and going to go waterfall hopping on a motorbike tomorrow.
So how much longer are you in Southeast Asia?
Until April 6th, so another month, a little less than a month.
Oh, okay.
Australia's a month away, and it might be pretty boring if I hop on here every week and just tell you about the stuff I'm not playing.
How is that different than regular weeks? Hey,
Ah.
By the way, I haven't on this trip gotten in any Baseball Highlights 2045 first mention.
Yes, you got the first mention.
Woo! Take that, everyone.
Mike Fitzgerald emailed me saying that the episode with John Cox from John Gets Games last week was a great episode. He really enjoyed it. And he said, but I noticed there was no first mention reference. So, and I was thinking to myself, you know what? That's too bad because even Alex was on. So you failed, Alex.
Well, here's the thing. Like the last time I hopped on the episode, it was like the 5th mention of Baseball Highlights 2045 because that was the Dan King episode.
Well, I'm just saying you had an opportunity to make sure Baseball Highlights was mentioned last episode and you failed. That's all I'm saying.
You know what, Sean? Here's the thing. Like you're doing 90% of the work, so I'm giving you 90% of the responsibility on that.
Great.
One. So
great.
Right back at you.
Wait, so you're currently doing 10% of the work? I'm confused.
Okay, fair enough. 99.99?
Okay.
I don't know.
All right. Yes. You did initiate the Skype call, so that's got to count for something.
Yep. I get a little slice there, and I spent valuable time on the internet chatting with y'all. So, there's that.
All right.
You're welcome, Dutchie. You're welcome. I will say I got my my BGG Con tickets this time around. I know, Jeremy, did you buy them to the wrong convention? Is that right?
That's correct, Alex. Thanks for bringing that up. I somehow managed to get into the spring registration, which is supposed to be closed during that time, and bought myself spring tickets.
Man, you got to just pivot at that point.
Just go?
Yeah, just go.
Okay.
Why not?
I'll bring you with me. Is that all right?
Yeah, if you got me a ticket, sure.
Well, hopefully, with everyone that bought tickets, we should have a pretty large contingent going out to BGG Con.
I was a little selfish. I only bought one. I know a bunch of people bought extras, and I was a little selfish there. I just got one for myself. That's about it.
Well, I think we'll have close to 10.
Yeah, it's looking to be quite a big ducal footprint, if you will.
Yeah, that'll be pretty sweet.
Don't step in the ducal footprint because I don't know. That sounds kind of gross.
It's a footprint.
Yeah,
it's a footprint. It's nothing nasty.
Yeah. Anyway, any final words to the Duchy, Alex?
If we won a podcast of the year on BGG, thanks for that. If not, thanks anyway. We appreciate it.
The votes close midnight the day this episode drops.
Yep. So go vote for us if you haven't already.
Yes.
Real quick.
Then thanks for voting for us.
Excellent.
Yep. That's what I got.
All right, buddy.
If you'd like to enter the Taraku contest, send a picture of the friendly Shogun in Vietnam to Sean at dukesofdice.com.
Yeah, but don't do that.
Do it.
I mean, do it, but don't. Just don't. Because there is no prize to receive at this point.
Well, but there might be.
Which is the end button here on Skype? Which is, where is that located? Is it the big red one?
Hey, Nick and Jeremy.
Yes.
Don't screw it up.
Hey. Yeah.
Hey, showing up is 90%, right?
All right. Thanks for filling in, guys. Have a good show.
Yeah, stay safe, Alex.
No problem. Take care.
All right, buddy. Talk to you later. All right. Well, I'm glad we got to check in with the friendly Shoggoth and his travel companion and special friend, Alex Goldsmith.
Now fiance.
Yeah. Very cool. All right. Well, that's going to do it for our recent plays, including plays from Alex. So that was pretty sweet. Let's head on over to the news desk. All right, first up in the news, Akrotiri Revised Edition is out from Z-Man Games, and this was an interesting two-player game designed by Senfun Lim and Jay Cormier, which I've played it several times. I really like it. It's a pick up and deliver game, which is something I don't typically like, but there's also some tile placement, and you're trying to set the tiles up in a certain way so that you're creating fulfillments for these maps to find certain islands. Really good. I really enjoyed this, but it looks like this new edition is expanding to 4 players, and they've also revised the rules in certain ways, and I'm not sure what that looks like. Apparently there's problems with the main game, which I didn't realize, or if it's just like an FAQ type situation, but now I'm kind of annoyed. The completionist in me kind of giving a little preview of our discussion topic, feels like, oh, well, I really enjoy 2-player Akrotiri. Maybe I need this new version to be able to play 4 players.
Well, maybe they'll do like Portal just did with Robinson Crusoe, where they had an upgrade pack.
Maybe, because, well, here's the thing. I've heard in the past that if you want to play this 4 players, that you could just buy 2 copies and put them together. Because it was actually, I think, designed as a 4-player game, but they wanted to market it as a 2-player game. I feel like I've heard that somewhere, or I could just be making this all up. Who knows? So I don't know that there's they would just be producing the game again for I don't know.
Well, they could do the FFG thing and just expect you to buy 4 copies to play 4 players.
There you go. Still bitter about that.
Yeah.
So yeah, Akrotiri is a really cool game. I really enjoy it. I'm interested to see what the differences are in the rules. I'm hoping they at least put out an update rules-wise so that those of us with the 2-player game can still play that. All right, next bit of news, Plaid Hat Games is announcing some expansions, in fact, deluxe expansions for Ashes Rise of the Phoenixborn. And then in addition to that, there's also an announcement for tournament and organized play, which is pretty interesting. I like Ashes a lot. I think it's a really solid dual-style game. I know there's some multiplayer that you can do, but I've only ever played it 2-player. I'm having difficulty playing these types of games, obviously, and it's solid. It's a solid game. But I think if I'm going to invest the time and energy, it's going to be into Star Wars Destiny, assuming I had any players for that here, which I don't. So I don't know where any of this is going, other than to say this is a really good game, and I'm glad it's getting some support and some expansions. So you guys have not played.
Well, I own a copy, but I haven't played it. So if you want to teach me the game, then maybe you'd have somebody to play with.
Okay. Yeah, it's a really solid game, really intuitive. It's similar in a lot of ways to Mage Wars.
I haven't played, though I have opened the box to borrow the tokens for other games.
That's true. We did play Netrunner but we were borrowing those tokens, yeah. So here's what's coming out. You've got The Law of Lions and the Song of Soaksend. Soaksend, Soaksend. That's a weird word. The Law of Lions features the commander of the pride, the follower of the path, the righteous judge, and the merciful servant. Her name is Odette Diamondcrest. Looks pretty interesting. The art on this is pretty sweet. And then there's the Song of Soaksend, and it says here, an ancient song binds its silvery strings to every living soul. Namine adds her voice to this unending melody. She plays the strings and subtly alters the song to her will. So yeah, some interesting description there. And of course, the art for this is fantastic. I think, did this win the Dice Tower Art of the Year?
I cannot remember. I know it was nominated.
It was nominated, and I know I voted for it because I think the art is phenomenal.
Yeah, that's primary reason I picked it up.
Yeah.
It just looks so cool.
So these new expansions are going to be released late spring or early summer of this year. And then in addition, they're going to release an organized play kit around the same time. That's going to contain enough price support and material for 4 tournaments worth of plays. So that's pretty good. Because I know some of the FFG tournament kits, you have one. It's fairly expensive, and you get one set for price support and things like that.
Well, this is Plaid Hat's first tournament style game, so that'll be interesting.
Well, no, they got Summoner Wars. I don't know that there was organized play though for Summoner Wars. It seems like there would have been. I'd have to double check that. But they're doing this thing called the War Within Tournament, which is very reminiscent of what Legends of the Five Rings did, where basically the outcome of the tournaments across everyone playing it is going to affect the next summoner that gets developed, which is L5R did that, Legend of the Five Rings, where depending on how tournaments resulted would result in how the storyline changed and which clan would be dominant in the Empire. So that's kind of cool. And then I guess the deluxe expansions are including the storage organization.
Yeah, and the storage looks really cool. It's kind of a generic Ashes box.
Right.
So you can pack up your deck, your dice, your tokens, and take that to the tournament, and it doesn't necessarily go to any particular summoner.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So I'm interested to see more of this. I haven't picked up any of the previous expansions yet. Still kind of exploring the core set itself.
Yeah, the core includes a good number of possibilities for deck building, right?
Yeah, it's either 6 or 8.
Yeah,
and you have all the copies of the cards you need with just one core set. So
that's a nice thing to do for consumers.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you mean I don't have to buy 4 copies of this game just to play it?
Man, so much bitterness just all around. All right,
love Arkham Horror.
Indeed, we all own multiple copies of the game. In fact.
Okay, last thing we'll talk about here is our Kickstarter for Food Truck Champion. This is from Daily Magic Games, who do the Valeria series. So I am really happy with them as far as publishers, the game design, development solid, the art and components is really solid. So this is something that by itself I'd be interested in, just knowing who the publishers are, knowing their track record. But on top of it, it is inspired by one of my favorite games, Glory to Rome. Now, I've heard some people describe this as a Glory to Rome retheme. In fact, Import Expert described that same way. It's not really a retheme. It's just, it takes inspiration from it. It's not the same game, just with a different theme. So I just want to make it clear that that's not what this is. So if you're interested, this is a $20 purchase or $24 for the deluxe copy, and I'm in for the deluxe copy. And then it's also, at least in the US, it's $4 shipping. This plays 2 to 5 players, and on your turn, you can take, I think it's one of a couple different actions. You can either take a staff action, which is kind of that Glory to Rome style play, or you can get an order ticket or draw some cards. And then the various staff actions are going to be what allows you to take cards from the marketplace, because this is multi-use cards. And so a card is either going to be a type of food, I think a type of order, or a different staff. And those different staff actions will let you do different things. So like a manager lets you get additional staff so you can get multipliers on certain staff actions in the future. The prep chef lets you take cards from your tableau and move it to a plate that you're trying to build a particular order on. Whereas I think the executive chef lets you do that directly from hand instead. So lots of different ways, to kind of build and fulfill these orders. So definitely feels reminiscent of Glory to Rome, but it looks like it's inspired, but with enough tweaks to make this a different game. So yeah, like I said, I'm in on this. Does this sound appealing to either of you guys?
So I really enjoyed Villages of Valeria, and for that reason alone, I was willing to go in at the $24 level. So looking forward to it. I like the idea of the tucking of multi-use cards. That really appeals to me, especially like you tend to get a lot more game out of a small box when they have that multi-function ability.
Sure.
Also, if you look at all the other designers that we watch on Kickstarters, they almost have exclusively all backed this.
Yeah.
Right. So, that's another key indicator, right? So if your other favorite designers are backing something, that might be, something to look at.
Yeah. I hadn't thought about that. That's an interesting thought.
So Kickstarter recently added the functionality where you can follow the backing habits of other creators. So if you look at the folks who created projects you've enjoyed and you see all of them back something that's kind of out of the blue to you, that should be an indicator like, hey, if all these folks who I like their games are interested in this game, it might be something to look at.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a good thought.
Yeah, I haven't backed it yet, but it's definitely been on my radar. So, cool. And it's got a Kickstarter exclusive, which we'll talk about at the end.
Yeah. So this ends March 15th. And like I said, $20 for the base game, $24 for the deluxe edition. And there's not a whole lot more there with the deluxe, but just like we saw with the Villages of Valeria. But yeah, I figured I'll go in for all of it, which again, we'll talk about that a little bit later. All right, well, that's going to do it for the Kickstarter, and that's going to do it for our look at the news. Conan, what is best in life? Crush your enemies, see them driven before you, hear the lamentations of their women. So I think we all know that I should probably just leave the Arnold Schwarzenegger impressions to Alex, but he's not here. So Ares Games put out Age of Conan, the strategy board game, not to be confused with that other Conan game that's out there right now. This strategy game has so many pieces, so many components, and if only there were a way to organize them easily. Oh, wait a second, our friends over at Meeple Realty have a solution. The Barbarian Highlands insert for Age of Conan. This is an amazing laser-cut wooden insert. These are easy to put together, super durable, and it's going to help keep you organized so that you can get your plays of Age of Conan in more frequently, set up and put away with ease. Hey, it's even got a pretty sweet dice tower. So go ahead and check out the Barbarian Highlands insert from Meeple Realty, but while you're at it, check out all their other amazing products. They have a huge line for some of the most popular board games. And on top of it, if you want to save 10% off your entire order, you can use the promo code Dukes of Dice MR2017. That's Dukes of Dice MR2017, 10% off your entire order. That's fantastic. So go check out MeepleRealty.com. Think inside the box. This week, we're headed back to Arcadia, but instead of fighting in the city, we're headed to the dungeons below, fighting some monster dice. It's Masmorra, Dungeons of Arcadia. All right, so Masmorra, Dungeons of Arcadia, another production from CMON. This is designed by Daniel Alves, Patrick Mateus, and Yuriko Kuna Neto. So in this game, if you're playing the standard competitive mode, you're trying to get the most experience points. And the game end is going to trigger when one player has reached 16. Everyone gets the same number of turns. Then whoever has the most points is the winner. This is a dungeon delving game where you don't have the dungeon laid out in front of you. You're going to build it as you go. And it's made up of simple, small square tiles and then occasionally these bigger I guess they're technically medium tiles, and then in some modes there's the large tile. But what you're going to do is you're going to spend some movement points to explore adjacent areas. You pull a new tile from the top of a stack, which you always see the next tile, and there's going to be some special features to a tile, usually some way to get money, or maybe heal, or maybe teleport. But most of these tiles are also going to have a monster that you're going to need to fight. And instead of chibi minis, because your characters are chibi minis, you're going to be fighting these monster dice. So there are basic monsters, then there's more advanced monsters, depending on which level of the dungeon you're in. You're going to roll these dice to determine which monster it is, and the monster is going to have some sort of stat, some attack value, a defense value, maybe some kind of special ability that you're going to have to fight off. All right. Well, real quick, let's talk about how you actually accomplish your turn. You have a pool of 6 dice. You're going to roll them. Yahtzee style, you can do one reroll. You keep some, reroll the others. The symbols are melee attack, range attack, movement, magic, and healing, and shields. And you're going to be able to allocate those dice to take those actions in however you want. So you can move. When you move in with a monster, you have to immediately fight it before you do anything else. What you're trying to do is equal or beat its defense, and then it's going to attack you back with its damage value. And if you're able to soak some of that up with your shields, you can prevent some of it. However, if you can do all of the damage necessary to kill the monster with just ranged dice or ranged abilities, then it's not going to get to strike back, which makes plenty of sense. What makes this game really interesting, though, is that you have special abilities where your dice get used to trigger these abilities that are improved actions. So as you level up, for example, you can get these new abilities. So now one of your ranged dice might give you a ranged plus $2 or $3, or your sword die now becomes 2 range because maybe you're chucking your sword. So you get better and better as time goes on, and it's an interesting allocation of these dice. And you're going to continue going through this dungeon. You find a second level, fighting more difficult monsters, hopefully gaining some more experience points. What's nice is that at a certain point, you get less value from the lower level monsters, so you can't just keep grinding them out. Or maybe you can't, maybe you want to, but it's kind of inefficient. You want to fight the bigger and nastier monsters. So yeah, that's pretty much how you play the base game, the core game here. We should note that what we're talking about here is the retail version. So both Jeremy and I have Kickstarter exclusives, add-ons, all that jazz, but we limited our plays to, at least for the purpose of this discussion, to the retail version of the game. So let's keep that clear. So what do you guys think of Masmorra, Dungeons of Arcadia?
So my comment on the theme of it, so I liked Arcadia Quest, so therefore this was attractive to begin with. I like the sort of setting it in that same thematic universe, but saying this is sort of like the training grounds for the heroes to get into the guilds that are Arcadia Quest.
Sure.
So it sort of fits in that same setting. From a mechanics perspective, I really like those color coded monster dice. That's something that I think is better than a monster deck that you're drawing from, and it has a little bit more of a feeling of, I know the section of randomness I'm rolling based on the color of die, but what monster shows up is still has a random element to it. We did find that occasionally, like if the wrong die result comes up and the monster happens to have an ability that your character just couldn't counter, it can feel like you just hit a wall. And to some extent, if that side of that die shows up at that time, you hit that wall whether you planned for it or not.
Right.
So that's a little interesting. Sean mentioned the leveling up mechanic. So it's important to note that leveling up happens real time during the game. You don't have to wait till the end of a session to level up the characters. So they level up the moment they get that experience points, and you sort of slide these tucked cards from underneath the character sheet to reveal the ability they've just gained. So the fact you level up real time during the adventure means it can be done as a one-shot. They're not linked. It's not like Arcadia Quest is, where it's adventures that build on each other. So a single shot, which I think makes it easier to get to the table in my mind. Sean mentioned the custom dice. I think that's a great way to have hit dice that have those custom icons that then move into slots to give you abilities. Really enjoyed that.
Yeah, so I don't know if you mentioned, Sean, this was crowdfunded in Brazil as another game called Masmorra de Dados. And CMON decided to bring it to the States and bring it into the Arcadia universe.
Right.
So there was some information about it before, and it looks like they did a pretty truthful port.
Yeah. Look at even like the characters themselves are pretty consistent, it looks like.
Right. So I thought that was kind of an interesting background that's worth investigation, at least. I think my opinion's going to differ from the other two guys. I like this game pretty well, actually.
Yeah.
There's aspects of it I really love. I like the drawing the tiles and building the dungeon as you go. I like the leveling up mechanics, but there are some shortcomings, so it's not going to be in my top 10 probably.
Okay.
And I'm sure we're going to get into that more. And one of the shortcomings is really what you get in the base box.
Yeah.
It's a $65 MSRP. You probably can get it for about $52, I think, from online retailers. And so you're only going to get 5 heroes in the base box. And I think that might start to feel pretty stale pretty quickly.
Oh, yeah. I was going crazy. I was absolutely going crazy with that limited number.
Even with playing 2 and 3 players, after 1 or 2 playthroughs, you've seen all the characters. And the characters have no variability inherent to them. You can't choose which skill tracks they're going to have. So every time you play one of the characters, you're stuck with the abilities that character can level up into.
And they'll probably bring to retail eventually the 2 expansions that they sold with the Kickstarter, which will add more heroes into the universe and more monsters. So that's something to look forward to, but we're not going to discuss here, I guess.
Yeah. So, yeah, there's a lot about this game that I enjoy. I like dungeon diving. I like rolling dice and allocating those for action selection. I like leveling up in the game. There's a quick. It's a quick. Well, let me rephrase that. It can be a quick game, and it's not a big investment of time necessarily. And so there's a lot that this game has going for it, just given my general preferences and tastes. But for some reason, it kind of fell short. And I will say this, though, and we'll talk about the cooperative play. The cooperative play is far better. I think it's far stronger than the competitive play. And I wish that the cooperative play was the default mode, because then I would have gotten more plays of the cooperative play in. And I feel like my ultimate rating might have been higher. But basically it was, okay, I'm going to play the default game, play it a bunch of times, and then, I should try these other modes as well. So there's epic mode and there's cooperative mode. And epic mode is kind of built in with cooperative mode. And so it was just kind of an afterthought. And I'm like, oh, yeah, this is kind of a different experience, because the competitive mode is really a race. And I tend to not like race games, because once you feel behind, you're behind, right? And I've had games where everyone's kind of come close, but I've also seen where someone's kind of lagged behind and hasn't really been able to make it up. So I prefer the cooperative, which is still a race against the clock. There's a countdown timer, if you will, but at least you're all kind of working together and not racing against one another. And this is as someone who's not even that crazy about cooperative games, right? I mean, I like them well enough, but it's not typically my desire is to play a cooperative game. But I'd still rather play this cooperatively than competitively. So it's interesting that the design choice, or the decision, was to say that the competitive is the default mode. But yeah, I think a lot of really smart decisions were made here. CMON bringing you over into the Arcadia Quest universe. You have the awesome hero chibis, and you have the ability to use those in Arcadia Quest and vice versa. So you have cards. There's a crossover kit that you can purchase that lets you go both ways, which is really awesome. And that's going to add to the variability. And I feel like this game needs variability to stay fresh. Tremendous variability to stay fresh, because ultimately the gameplay itself feels a little repetitive and feels a little grindy to me, I think.
Yeah, I think if you can get into that second level of the dungeon, there's a lot more variability there. And I think there ought to be more rune rooms. We didn't talk about the tiles.
Yeah.
But as you draw tiles as you do the exploration action, which you spend movement points to do, you're going to draw tiles from the deck. And depending on what level of the dungeon you're in, you draw from different decks. And there's traps in there, there's curses in there. And those kind of add to the replayability, right? Because you don't know what you're going to get. And sometimes it's nasty, like the trap, but then you can go and defeat it and you get some experience points. The big room tiles or the medium room tiles are really cool because they might have a boss token. They might have a lot of treasure on them. I think those are more interesting.
Yeah.
Or specific monsters sometimes.
So let's talk about the rulebook real quick. To me, this is kind of reminds me of an Uwe Rosenberg rulebook where it does an excellent job teaching you the game. I felt like I was able to pick up the gameplay from this pretty easily, but it's a terrible rulebook for having to look stuff up.
Yeah, it's not great for referencing.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest complaints I have is it really needs a table of the order of operations for combat resolution. It's very ambiguous. It's kind of just stuff in order. And so we took that as to mean the order of resolution, but it's not patently clear that that's the case.
Yeah.
So note this doesn't occur during every combat. We have these issues. It's
Sure.
just like whenever one of these corner cases comes up of, well, do I get the XP before I die? Those kind of questions are difficult to answer based on the way the rules are written.
But the epic mode and the co-op mode, I actually feel like those rules are easier to reference, which is kind of odd because those are consolidated together at the end of the rule book.
Right.
And you can just go find what you need to there. But everything else is kind of all over the place. And it's not a short rule book.
No.
Given the weight of the game.
No. Yeah. And like I said, I mean, I'm not trying to harp on it too much. It was a very competent rulebook for purposes of learning the game. I think there's some stuff missing from it. Well, this is a CMON production, so I think we have pretty high expectations for component quality and art. And I mean, this feels like an Arcadia Quest game, right? And for my money, literally, the production is fantastic. I think the chibi miniatures are great. The card quality, the board quality is all really solid.
Yeah. There's things about it that I even prefer over Arcadia Quest, like this unknown map thing. That's a really neat mechanic. And they supported that well with the tiles that they printed. The art on each tile is, for the most part, different and looks really good.
Yeah.
I think the monster dice are the component that stands out in my mind. So they're oversized. They're not standard D6 size. I think there may be two centimeter dice or 1.8 centimeter, something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
They're larger than a standard D6. And on each face, they have a printed color picture that is then lacquered over. So it's not like stickers on a die. And on those pictures, you get all the stats you need and, a cool screaming monster chibi sort of art on it. So to me, those monster dice are like a really awesome component.
Yeah. And so you get basically the blue dice, which are the standard monster dice, and then the more advanced dice are the orange dice. And those are the only ones you get in the set. So you have 6 basic monsters, you have 6 advanced monsters, and then there are some bosses which aren't dice, but they are these circular boards or punch chits, right? Some variability, but not a lot, which kind of, again, for me at least, kind of speaks to the variability problem because there is so much rinse and repeat in this game. I've wanted a little bit more variability.
So on the issue of component quality, I'm not sure these sculpts are up to the same extremely high quality that the other miniatures in the Arcadia Quest line are at.
Oh.
So especially the Kickstarter exclusives. And the scales seem to be slightly different. I don't know if you've noticed this. The chibi heads are a little bit larger than the ones that came in the Arcadia Quest Inferno box. And a lot of the minis that have dresses or robes are hollow on the inside. They're like a single casting, maybe with arms glued on. Whereas the Arcadia Quest Inferno, Arcadia Quest base game, they have very, very high quality miniatures. So I'm a little bit disappointed in the miniature quality.
Interesting. So I hadn't paid too much attention. Have you been painting your minis?
Yeah, I've been painting.
So that's probably why you've been more focused on them. You're like, oh, this feels lighter than it should.
And I like to glue washers to the bottom of my miniatures so that I can use magnetized bases, so I'm not scraping the paint off. And some of them, they're so hollow. It's been I'm going to have to backfill with epoxy. Interesting.
All right. Well, let's talk in general then about the gameplay. What stood out to you guys as far as fun, exciting about this gameplay?
So I think it's almost a two-part answer whether or not you're playing the cooperative or competitive.
Yeah.
I'll say for the competitive mode first, to me, that like you said, racing for experience points, but it felt like you didn't get to a finality of the dungeon because someone is getting to those experience points to satisfy win condition probably before you got to a big room with a boss feel to it. Mm-hmm. The other thing that occurred in at least 3 of my 4 competitive plays, I think, where at the end condition felt like it was a forced king making. So where one person was about to win, so of course the other 2 people, all these things I'm thinking were 3-player games, the other 2 people are trying to prevent that, right? Because they're trying to win as well. But you end up in a situation where when a character dies, they go down to the starting XP level of the current level they're on.
Right.
So you have this situation where you're trying to, the other players are trying to kill the guy who's about to win, but the point math makes it feel like what's occurring is the player who is definitely not going to win is making the decision on which other player is going to win.
Yeah.
That happened in three of our games, and it felt a little artificial. It's not like the person was trying to be in that position,
right?
But they ended up, whether they make a decision or an indecision, that it's going to result in that. So the end of the competitive mode didn't feel right to me. The cooperative mode, however, I thought had great time pressure, so just enough where you could get to the sort of final hurdle where it would be challenging. So I think the game that we played, we lost, but we lost by like a turn or 2.
Yeah.
And to me, that was really exciting. And you had sort of this like group Yahtzee cheering mechanic where we're all sort of paying attention to each other's turns. Where in the competitive version, it felt like I didn't need to pay attention to what was going on at the table until it was my turn.
Yeah.
So it felt difficult to stay engaged. And I imagine in competitive play, if you had more than 3 players, like 4 or 5, it would get pretty rough and it would stay on the table an awful long time.
Yeah, I don't think you want to play this game at the higher player counts. I actually enjoyed it quite a bit at 2.
Yeah.
Which would be my preferred count, I think, playing forward.
So did any of us play at 4 or 5?
I think I played at 4 once, but it was my first play, which was a couple of weeks back.
Yeah.
So I don't have a great memory of it.
So I didn't want to play this at 5 because at 3, I felt, especially 3 competitive, I felt like there was so much downtime. And like you said, Nick, you're not necessarily engaged in, off your turn. So I was like, yeah, I don't think I want to play this at 4. I certainly don't want to play this at 5.
We haven't talked about the treasure cards and what they do.
Right.
So in competitive mode and co-op mode, there's 2 separate decks. There's these treasure cards that you get either from collecting treasure chests or from killing monsters. And these cards have 2 abilities. One that's generally good for you, and then one in the competitive mode that's bad for your opponents, kind of good for you, and one that in the cooperative mode, it's generally something that's good for another hero, just with kind of a weaker ability. So in competitive play, I think the thing that's supposed to keep you engaged are these treasure cards where you kind of play a Munchkin-esque stab you in the back kind of, I'm going to steal some XP from you because we're in the same room, or hey, you're getting that treasure card, no, I'm going to lay down this nope card and take it from you. And then there's a counter spell and some other effects. So the intentions there, I don't think the execution was perfect.
So here's exactly what happens almost every single time, right? So all of those take that cards or the take that side of the cards that will say usually play at the start of your opponent's turn, right? So if it's like if it's going to increase, there's one that increases the defense of all monsters, or one that removes a die from a player's pool. It says play at the start of your turn. So I say to myself, okay, well, Nick's winning, so at the start of Nick's turn, I'm going to play this card. and then I forget to because I'm just so not engaged.
Yeah.
That's happened at least a dozen times to me. And maybe that's just I'm a bad player, but it's just, yeah. I'm like, this would make total sense to play here. And then I just completely forgot because I'm not engaged in the game.
If you're not using the treasure cards, it's going to be a less good experience.
Yeah. And they're fine. Like I like the card play of the treasure cards. Cause basically, I mean, you're primarily getting them from killing the monsters, right? And so what's cool is some of them are also worth I keep calling them VPs, XP points hidden, right? So if you have them at the end of the game, then you say, oh, well, you have 17 and I have 16 on board. Oh, look, I'm actually +3 because I have a +1 and a +2. I win.
And those cards are interesting because their part that's good for you is still there, right? It's like 2 extra ranged attack, which that's pretty lucrative sometimes. So you might actually give up your bonus XP at the end of the game for that.
Right.
So there's some interesting decisions there, but
I agree.
I kind of wish there were more treasure cards, maybe. I don't know. I'm not sure what would fix this.
Yeah, because you can go through the deck pretty quickly. And I like there's kind of a fast and furious play to the cards, which I appreciate. But yeah, for some reason, it off turn play it has been difficult for me, for whatever reason.
On the note of forgetting to do things during a turn in this game, we had a horrible problem with forgetting to do the Dungeon Master phase. So during your turn, a hero starts their turn by rolling their dice and begin assigning dice to their action selection. So that includes their movement, their attack, and then they go through a monster battle. Once all that is resolved, you've assigned all your dice, then you're supposed to look at what's left on the board, spawn monsters in designated spawn locations, and use monster movement points, moving monsters on the board around.
Right.
With restrictions where they have to move towards the closest hero, they can't have too many in a room, et cetera, et cetera. However, the number of times we forgot to do that phase because you have that finality of I've just rolled the dice and assigned them, and Jeremy's ready to pick up his dice and roll them. Jeremy starts rolling through his turn, and we realize, like, oh, nuts, we forgot to spawn the monsters that would have changed Jeremy's decisions.
Yeah.
So I know that happened to me several times. It happened to Sean a couple times in our games, too. So that was a little frustrating. I don't know what the fix is, but maybe it's that engaged enough of the other players to say, oh, you forgot to do this.
Mm-hmm.
So several times we had to look back and can we retcon this? We've gone 2 turns by. Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of times the monsters don't do anything because they won't move if they're in a room with another player.
Right.
And you don't spawn monsters if the room has any monster or hero in it. So sometimes the Dungeon Master phase just doesn't happen.
Right.
And I think that adds to the confusion of skipping the phase. Yesterday, I made a mistake when teaching the rules, and it's really important to get this right. The monsters move, and then you spawn.
Right.
So you can clear out a room that has a spawner, and then spawn on top of it there. And the monsters you just spawned, thereby don't move.
Right.
So make sure you get that right if you decide to give this a play. So another comment about this related to possibly the completionist discussion we'll have is CMON has definitely set it up where if you are big into Arcadia Quest, even if you don't like this game, you are probably going to buy it for the use of the minis in Arcadia Quest.
Yeah.
And vice versa. So if you didn't, Arcadia Quest wasn't necessarily your bag, but you played Masmorra and went, this is awesome. Well, now you're incentivized to get Arcadia Quest stuff to add more variability to this game. So they're linked without being the same game.
Yeah. It's a pretty interesting marketing decision that makes sense because it's a minimal cost for them to put out extra cards. I mean, there's the design overhead, right? Because you still have to design the abilities for, here's this Masmorra character. We need some abilities in Arcadia Quest. Boom. Let's print the cards and we're done, right? So, I mean, it's not free for them by any stretch of the imagination, but a pretty low cost, I think, overall compared to what it's going to potentially reap for them in rewards.
So let's be clear about the crossover kit. If you purchase that in the Kickstarter, which we're not totally sure if it's going to be available in retail.
It wasn't listed as a Kickstarter exclusive.
Right, but that doesn't necessarily mean that CMON will bring it to the, your local gaming store. It was $15, and it basically brought all the Arcadia retail box characters into Masmorra and all the Masmorra retail characters into Arcadia Quest. Is that right?
I believe so, yeah.
Or that's kind of confusing because some of them, like I know if you buy the Adventurers set, it comes with the Arcadia Quest cards for those heroes. So not totally sure. It's kind of a mess in the crossover. So if you didn't back this on Kickstarter, I'm not sure that you need these heroes for Arcadia Quest.
Depends how aggressive your completionist instinct is.
Yeah. That just depends. Like I said, I'm sure we'll talk about that. Yeah, I think that's definitely the case. Now, what are your guys' thoughts then on because I kind of expressed mine, the competitive play versus the cooperative play? I mean, is there do you have a preferred?
I'm definitely a bigger fan of the cooperative play, mostly because the people I played this game with preferred it much more than the competitive mode.
Yeah.
And that's probably 10 people at this point.
I would definitely go with the co-op play as well. I think if this is coming to the table and I have a vote in the mode we're playing, it would be the co-op mode. To me, it felt like, and it's not even a one versus many sort of setup, because the evil deck that shows up in co-op play, which I don't think we've mentioned yet either, basically does a global bad effect that affects all the players somehow. And I think you draw one each player turn.
Yeah.
So that deck is sort of the counting mechanism for how long you have to get through the co-op scenario. To me, that's the way to play this game, and it really should have been the primary mode.
Yeah, I don't think I will ever play this again competitively.
I definitely will never play the epic competitive play.
Yeah, so I didn't do that because I was really not enjoying my competitive plays. I really wasn't. And when I saw epic, I was like, ugh. Fortunately, like I said before, the epic is incorporated into the cooperative play. And so it's interesting to hear that you liked epic cooperative, but didn't like epic competitive.
Yeah, so epic competitive, the game ends the same way it does for the cooperative, where someone has defeated the final big bad of the dungeon.
Oh, man.
And that takes forever in a competitive play.
Yeah.
And this game definitely outstays its welcome at that point.
So one of the things in competitive play is that you can continually die, right? And every time you die, you will lose a random treasure card, which could be an XP card because you're keeping those in your hand, right? And you also drop down a level. Let me come back to that because I want to talk about that. And then in the cooperative play, if one of you dies, that's it. That you lose. And I like that there are stakes there. I mean, I also like, kind of like in Arcadia Quest, you keep dying because it has that kind of arcade feel where you're just respawning. But for some reason, I enjoyed the stakes there, and I enjoyed that you had to work together and you had to prioritize keeping your fellow players alive. That, I think, had some more interesting decisions to me. Oh, I rolled this health. I don't need it. Oh, but you know what? I'm in the room with my buddy who's down to 3 health. Maybe I should use it for them. So I enjoyed that. But let's talk about dropping XP when you die in the competitive game. So like you mentioned before, Nick, you drop to whatever tier, to the start of whatever tier you're on. So like the first 3 XP are on tier 0. And then when you level up, you're on the second tier. And there's, I think, 5 points there. And then the next tier, there's 5 points there. Every time you die, you're going to lose between 1 and 5 points.
You could lose 0.
Or 0 is how we were playing it, which wasn't quite clear.
So if you were already at the far left part of the track for the tier you're on and you die, you don't really change XP, I think.
We think.
Based on our, again, rulebook. Yeah. But based on the ability, what we could find is if you were already down at the starting XP level of the tier you're on, then there's no, other than losing a treasure card, there's no negative effect to dying.
Right. Or you could be at the very far right end, right before you bump up to the next tier, and now you've lost an entire tier. You've lost 5 XP, which is huge.
That's probably the end of the game for you.
I mean, that's like 2 to 3 turns worth of XP gaining that you've lost.
Right. So the question is, okay, is that just some unnecessary randomness, or is that something you're supposed to kind of play around?
Like I said about the ending of the game, to me that felt very weird because the ending condition is getting to the end of the last tier. And then it tracks beyond that for endgame scoring. So you know the person who is about to end the game has the most to lose from dying.
Right.
And it created that dynamic that we talked about earlier where the effects of that person dying are significantly more severe.
Yeah.
So it felt like we had to play around it because if you didn't take that into account for for what's going on, you ended up in that kind of weird king-making scenario.
But so I guess what I'm trying to get at is if I am on that last spot before reaching the next tier and I have the most to lose, what does that mean? Do I play it safe until I can eke out another XP? I mean, because that also seems problematic, because now I'm not playing my game. I'm kind of waiting around to, I don't know, like it seems counterintuitive, and it seems like that can be a huge swing. Whereas if you die, you lose 2 XP. Like I can see it just saying you lose 2 XP. If it forces you to drop down a level, you lose one of your upgrades until you get it back. And to me, that seems fine, and that's at least consistent.
That would definitely smooth it out. Something along those lines that was consistent for the effect of a death is X, and that wasn't dependent on where you were on the XP track.
Yeah.
You know what else felt odd to me is the game ends at 16 experience.
Yeah.
Which is 1 notch before you draw your 4th upgraded ability.
Yeah.
And so you don't never, but most often you don't get that last ability.
Or if you do, you don't get to enjoy it.
Use it, yeah. So that feels odd to me, and it's kind of unsatisfying. So I could maybe see playing this to 21 experience.
Yeah.
Just so that happens, and not playing the epic variant where you have to kill the last guy.
So let's talk about the theme. Fairly thematic, I would think, right? I mean, it's kind of Ameritrash. I mean, there's not really a campaign mode. You're not necessarily hooked into a story, but I don't know. What do you guys think?
So I agree with that statement about not being hooked into a campaign, and I think that's a bonus. So,
yeah.
I mean, Arcadia Quest sort of does that in this universe of being hooked into a campaign, whereas this doesn't. I do like how it's sort of hooked into the Arcadia universe, and there's this link, I think it explains it in the intro to the rulebook, that this is where single heroes go to sort of prove their worth before they become part of an Arcadia Quest guild. So, at least from a meta perspective, the game links into the Arcadia universe.
Yeah, I think this is a great world-building thing that CMON's done with Arcadia Quest, because the cards here are much larger for the players, right? They're not like a standard-sized playing card. And the back has quite a bit of flavor text for each of the different characters, and their different abilities kind of have like a little flavor text. And there's no flavor text hardly on any of the Arcadia Quest cards.
Yeah, that's true.
If they don't have a natural ability, they'll have flavor text.
Yeah.
But, so I see it as an expansion of that universe. And so for me, it feels thematic. And I do like this kind of one-off. So you jump in there, you play the scenario, and then you're done. Arcadia Quest is an investment.
Oh, yeah.
And it means playing the game quite a bit, which I like, but that's harder to get to the table.
Yeah. And I'm interested in the tournament mode for Arcadia Quest, which is odd because I enjoy the campaign style play in theory. I just don't know that I'm that crazy about Arcadia Quest campaigns anymore.
Well, seeing as we haven't finished the campaign that 3 of us are in.
Yes.
I don't know if it's been 2 months, 3 months since we played the last session of it.
It's been about 6.
Okay, well.
We're waiting on Sean.
Yeah, pretty much.
Why do I always get blamed? I get blamed for the Pandemic Legacy group. I don't know why I get blamed.
You have this schedule
of games you want to play to review. This podcast thing.
Whatever. Forget you guys. So real quick, jumping over to the guild, Ian Kissel says, I kickstarted Masmorra and have been extremely disappointed. Although the dice mechanism is cool, the game is too short in standard mode and too long in epic. There's not enough interaction with 2 players and too much downtime with 4 or more. Too many monster reference sheets, and the leveling up is not that exciting. It essentially is a more complicated game of Munchkin without the humor or drawn out ending. I rate it a 3.
I see where Ian's coming from.
Yeah.
I actually like that we dropped the drawn out ending, because that's my least favorite part of Munchkin. Now, the humor is kind of appreciated, but I'm going to have a different rating.
Okay. So Megan Axer has some questions or raises some points about the differences in editions, right? So she says the base game is the same for both, but the Kickstarter version has a lot more to offer. Number of heroes, monsters, components, etc. So is the game worth it to a gamer if they buy the retail version, or will they need all the Kickstarter exclusives and extras to truly enjoy the game? Does the retail version have $65 worth of game, or is only the Kickstarter version worth that? So I think that's kind of a big question to answer. And for the most part, I would say the retail version is probably not worth the $65. If In fact, I would probably avoid the retail version altogether. If I didn't have a vested interest in getting more heroes for Arcadia Quest, and if I didn't have all the Kickstarter exclusives that are going to drastically add to the variability of this game, all the extra monsters. I mean, I've got access to tons more monsters. I've got access to tons more heroes. And I think that's the only way I would even be interested in continuing to play this game. I will not get rid of this game because now I can port them over into Arcadia Quest if necessary. So yeah, I don't know that the retail version of this game is that hot.
So I'll have a slightly counter opinion. So I think that the retail version, as long as you don't have a need for variability, so if this is something that you want to play just on rare occasions, you're not going to encounter the lack of variability that is what the Kickstarter package sort of covers. So I think that if your desire is to have a dungeon crawl like this, that you're going to get to the table once in a blue moon, this just fills a niche in your collection. It's not going to be something you bring to the table, twice a month or more frequently than that. You probably aren't going to notice the lack of variability in the retail version.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to kind of side with Nick here. I think...
Wait, you guys aren't both agreeing with me right now?
No, we're not.
It's crazy.
So for me, the $65 is maybe too high, but if you could get it, at $50 or so, maybe that's okay. It's like $10 a miniature, right? Because you have 5 in the base game. I think where you're going to get exhausted is probably in the monster dice, not so much the heroes. So once the retail expansion comes out of the extra monster dice, because there should be one coming, I think that will add to the replayability considerably, because it will effectively double the number of monsters. And I think it adds 2 additional boss tokens.
Yeah.
So
we're talking probably $80, $90.
You're talking a $90 buy-in at that point. So
yeah.
I'm not sure it's worth $90. So to kick off our final thoughts, I'm going to give this game a split rating.
Uh-oh.
Not split decimal points.
Okay, then we're fine. A blue peg, pink peg split. Okay.
Yeah. So a co-op mode and a competitive mode. And I'm just going to ignore the epic competitive. That should not be done. For me, the cooperative mode is fun, and it's really much easier to get to the table. So I think I'm going to give that a 5. It's a great game. We'll rarely turn down a play of it. However, the competitive mode is much more difficult to get to the table, and I enjoy it less. I don't enjoy it as much as my playgroup has. So I'm kind of juggling between a 3 and a 4, but ultimately, because of the difficulty of getting other people to play it, I think it's really going to land at a 3 there.
Okay.
So that gives me an aggregate score of a 4.
All right.
Which is a good game worth playing, just not all the time. Belongs in the duchy.
And just to be clear, we work on a 6-point rating system. So, yeah. All right. So okay. 4 aggregate, 3 for competitive, 5 for cooperative.
That's where I'm landing at.
Okay. Cool. Nick, what do you think?
So, in fact, I also am going to land on a split rating. So I think at the co-op, I do like this game quite a bit. I think it'd be pretty easy for me to get to the table with not a huge lift in teaching or complexity. So I give the co-op a rating of a 4. And that's a good game worth playing, just not all the time, belongs in the duchy. I'd like to be able to access this game, whether I own it or someone else does. Now, for the competitive mode, I would definitely go lower. So for me, that's probably a 3. So I don't think there's anything wrong with the mechanics or the setup. It's just not going to be something I'm going to gravitate towards. So again, a 3 is a game is okay, not exciting. We'll play in the right situation.
So we've talked a lot about, this is Alex's thesis. Alex's thesis is that when you kickstart a game, you're going to be more likely to like it because you want to kind of reinforce that purchase, right? Or just in general, but more so with Kickstarter, because then you have all that anticipation and waiting for the game and whatever. So I'm gonna put a nail in that coffin, Alex, because I think that's crazy. I think we can still be objective here. And here we go. I'm gonna do a split rating 2. All right, competitive version, a 2. I'm giving it a 2. Game has some merit, but has significant issues. Yeah, I'm never gonna play this competitively again. Never. And it's just terrible. It's just terrible. The more I thought about it, the more I mean that. Did I have fun during those competitive plays? Yeah, it was fine, but I have no desire to ever play it. I don't enjoy the race. And if we're strictly talking the retail game, there's just not enough variability for me. There isn't. When you have these other dice, you're able to put them all into a bag and then draw out. And that makes it a lot more interesting for me because you're not So now it's not just, okay, which one of the 6 faces am I going to roll? But it's, well, which set of monsters am I actually pulling from? So, yeah, a 2. Now, as far as the cooperative game goes, I'm going to give it a 3. Game was okay, not exciting, we'll play in the right situation. So it doesn't rise to a 4 for me. I think maybe it can get there. I think that if I'm playing just cooperative and I'm adding in everything, I think it could probably get to a 4. I can't do that yet. This was a game that I really wanted to like. Absolutely. I really did. And the more I kept playing, at least the competitive mode, the more I was just kind of like, I'm just grinding this out. Like it became less and less fun. It overstayed its welcome by about 20%. Even the competitive mode did, which I know, like Ian said, it felt too short. It still felt just a little bit too long for me. So ultimately, I'm keeping this, right? Because Cool Mini or Not has done a good job, and I want to be able to use this stuff in Arcadia Quest. I am still interested in trying this some more with more of the add-ons, right? With more of the dice, more of the heroes. And so maybe the cooperative could get to a 4 for me when we do a reroll a year from now. It's not something that I'm like, I don't want to ever play this again. I am still interested in seeing if this game can rise my estimation, which I think says a lot, because sometimes I'll be like, well, no, I'm just done. But no, I want to give this game a chance a year from now to have come up to a 4. I want it to go up to a 4 for me. I do. But for now, it's a 2 competitive. Wow, a 2. And a 3 cooperative. Feels weird. By the way, 3 is game is okay, not exciting. We'll play in the right situation. Those are our scores. Jeremy, you look really disappointed in me right now.
I'm disappointed in the game myself. Like, I want to give this a 6. Maybe it's because I backed it on Kickstarter.
Yeah.
But just the idea of it is really appealing to me.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I can't even put my finger on what it is that disappoints me. It just falls flat for whatever reason, and it just bothers me.
Yeah.
It seems crazy to me that our ratings range from a 2 to a 5.
Oh, yeah.
For game experiences, we all sort of have similar mechanical opinions of the game, but it's just how you choose to play the game and what role we think of it in.
Well, what's interesting, Nick, is that on your first play, you said, I think I like this more than Arcadia Quest.
That's true. So the first time I sat down and played the competitive version, I said, I like this more than Arcadia Quest.
Yeah.
Because looking at a single shot versus a campaign, I thought I could get at the table more. Again, I'm not encountering variability issues on my first play, but I thought that initially. And then as I played it more, it turned into more of that grind. And the co-op mode was a little bit of a silver lining.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was interesting that my opinion, I think, degraded over time of the plays of this. And to some extent, I think I remember you making a comment that once you played the co-op version, your opinion of the competitive version changed.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So, all right, well, that's going to do it for our review of Masmorra, Dungeons of Arcadia, with a big range from a 2 to a 5, competitive, cooperative, a bunch of numbers thrown in there, but yeah. All right, for this week's Dukes Double Take, we're going to take a look back at episode 81, Unfamiliar Territory. Not territory, but territory. And in this episode, we were joined by Danny Mandel and Ben Tchaikovsky, who are the designers of a new game from Gutshot Games that isn't out yet. It's called Headhunters. Looks really cool. There's been some more developments on it since last year, but I'm excited for that. We reviewed Terra from Bezier Games, which is a trivia game, but you don't necessarily have to know the right answer. You just have to kind of be able to guess what's about right. So this is kind of a history general trivia game where it might say, all right, here's the Roman Colosseum. You have to be able to guess where it's located, about what time it was built, and it might want to know, like, how many people does it hold. Each card's kind of different. When this card comes up, you're going to take turns kind of bidding. You have some cubes, and you're going to either be able to place it on a map, and there are different regions, but these regions are exclusive. So I'm like, oh, well, I know this is in Italy, so I'm going to put it in kind of the Mediterranean region. And Nick, you know, well, I know it's Italy too, but I can't place there, so I'm at least going to place adjacent, which can get me some better points. And then, Jeremy, you say, okay, well, there are plenty of other adjacent points, so instead I'm going to get my initial guess on what year I think it was constructed. And so at the bottom, there's a track of time that ranges from, 5,000 BC to 2010 or something like that. And then there's another track, which is just a pure number track, which the individual cards kind of determine what that number represents. In this case, it's the number of attendees that can visit the Coliseum. So we keep bidding these until we're done, and then you're scoring, I think it's like 3 points if you're exactly right, or 1 point if you're adjacent. You recover some of your cubes, and then you go on to the next round. And whoever has the most points is the winner of Terra. At the time, I gave it a 4. Alex gave it a 4, which is means something, which is a good game worth playing just all the time, belongs in the Duchy. And you guys actually both played it, helped us out for the review a year ago.
That's true. So I think my comment, I haven't played it since, but I think my comment about that game, that the number track and the date track you mentioned are both not quite logarithmic.
Yeah.
But they start jumping by orders of magnitude. And I think the comment that I remember from those initial plays was that sometimes the question the card asked fell well within one of the ranges. So it's say 5,000 BC is the answer, and the range is 2,000 BC to 10,000 BC.
Yeah.
So a big range. Sometimes the answer was like right on the border of one of those cutoffs.
Yeah.
So when the Colosseum was in its heyday in, 2000 BC, and the line on the guesses is between 2000 BC. So sometimes the answers were more difficult based on where the timeline hash marks were. So that's what stood out to me.
Yeah, I got the one play in a year ago, and I enjoyed it. It was fun, but I haven't sought out to play it again. I didn't purchase. Was it America? Was the kind of revisit?
Yeah, with specifically American trivia.
But I wouldn't be object to playing it. So
yeah, and I'm kind of in that same boat. In fact, that's almost spawned in an alternate universe a different discussion topic, where do you keep games that you aren't necessarily crazy about, but because they fulfill a particular niche in your collection. So for example, this would be a good trivia game, and I gave it a 4 at the time. It's probably going to fall to a 3. Game is okay, not exciting, will play in the right situation. I got rid of my copy just because I'm getting rid of stuff that isn't a 5 or a 6, just for the availability that I have. And it's certainly something that I think is a good game to have at Empire. It's kind of like a Wits and Wagers, where it's a good trivia game. If someone's like, oh, I like Trivial Pursuit, well, okay, let's not play Trivial Pursuit. Let's play this instead. You'll get your trivia fix. And there's an interesting kind of Euro, bidding system and point scoring that could serve as a gateway to some other types of games potentially. So I think it's a really solid game, and I would like to be able to have access to this or something like it, but I had no desire to ever bring it out. And I never had that situation where, we had a guest over and it's like, oh, I'm big into Trivial Pursuit. Oh, well, let's try this instead. Just never wound up happening. And so I couldn't keep it just in case. However, our buddy Chris Holmes says, Terra is great fun for Wikipedia lovers like me. I've played it with my Sunday school students on occasion because I like teaching them about the world. God's creation, he says, around us. All right, that's going to do it for our Dukes Double Take on Terra. This week, we're going to be discussing completionism in board games, but first, a quick word about our sponsor. One of the favorite Kickstarter fulfillments I ever received was Orleans Deluxe from Tasty Minstrel Games. And now, Tasty Minstrel has a brand new Orleans expansion called Orleans Invasion. This is the first large expansion for this award-winning game, and there are 6 scenarios inside, some new buildings, and several new event cards. What's really nice about these expansions is that they're modular, so you can kind of pick and choose what kind of experience you want to add. So for example, the Prosperity expansion adds some new buildings and introduces the Carpenter, a new craftsperson. In the Invasion scenario, players have to work cooperatively in order to fend off an invasion and fulfill some personal goals to win. The Duel is a scenario for 2 players in which both opponents have to compete for 4 different objectives to win. In addition, there's 3 solo challenges: the Dignitary, Capital Virzon, and Traveling Salesman. So lots of stuff in this expansion. I can't wait to dig into all of these because this is a fantastic game and this is a fantastic expansion. So check out Orleans Invasion at your local friendly game store or your favorite online retailer. And for all of Tasty Minstrel's other fantastic games, go to playtmg.com. All right, so given that we were reviewing Masmorra, Dungeons of Arcadia, given that Rum and Bones just came in, given that Arcadia Quest Inferno just fulfilled, the question of, are you a completionist when it comes to board games came up. Are you susceptible to these types of marketing ploys? Do you have a proclivity to back something if it's going to get you some sort of exclusives? When do you prefer to wait until retail? And then if you don't get in on this, how much are you willing to pay in the aftermarket for some of these exclusives? So those are some of the questions I think can guide this discussion. And given the fact that all three of us are junkies, I mean, we're all three big time junkies.
Indeed.
So
I have an acquisition disorder.
yeah. So I don't know. What are your guys' thoughts on this topic?
So there's a lot of games that show up on Kickstarter that have these lofty stretch goals and a ton of exclusives. And a lot of times I haven't played that game yet, whether it's from a publisher I recognize or not. So I have some hesitancy to want to back something at a $150+ level, having never played it. However, I know if I like the game, I'm going to want everything that's being offered in that Kickstarter. So it's sort of a double-sided coin on whether or not you want to go all in on the Kickstarter on something you haven't played. Now, once you've played it, I feel like if I like the game and I want to put it in my collection, I kind of want all the bits and parts. It needs to sort of all be there. And then part of that is other aftermarket accessories that may go for that game, like an insert, like upgraded currency, like upgraded components that aren't even necessarily part of an initial Kickstarter and expansion sort of package.
Yeah, so a proverbial dump truck arrived to my house this month, and it dropped off several tons of CMON plastic.
Yeah.
So I have a problem, especially with CMON, where I just want to go all in, get all the things. And Arcadia Quest is in my top 10. It's definitely a 6 for me. I couldn't say no.
Did you wind up backing Rise of Moloch?
I backed at the $1 level so that I had access to the pledge manager.
I refrained.
Good for you.
I don't know how, because I did Massive Darkness. I've done everything, but I think it was kind of a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth from On Her Majesty's Secret Service, which had nothing to do gameplay wise, although it's the same setting. But yeah, for the most part, if CMON's putting something out, I'm gonna back it. I'm gonna get all the exclusives. But at least with CMON, with the knowledge that if I'm not crazy about it, or I don't need to keep it for Arcadia Quest, I can turn around and unload it and get my monies back, and then sometimes plus some. So it's kind of an insurance policy. Oh, it's terrible.
Yeah, I did not back Zombicide Black Plague, and I love that game.
Yeah.
And I have been pursuing pieces of it since then, and it's costed me much more than backing the Kickstarter would have.
Yeah, so I didn't like Zombicide, right? I don't like it at all. And then I've heard from people who also don't like Zombicide who are like, yeah, Black Plague is really good. And I'm like, but because I didn't back it, I'm kind of avoiding getting into it at all because I don't want to do what you're doing, Jeremy. And I will do what you're doing because I didn't back Arcadia Quest when it first came out. And I have since been hunting down the missing exclusives. And I've got a good chunk of them, but I'm not all the way there yet.
I'm not going after the Guildmaster because I didn't back the original Arcadia Quest, and the prices for that, for what you get, it's like 25 more heroes.
Yeah,
it's just not there for me. And the same with the Zombicide Black Plague. There were a lot of exclusives, like the Rat Abomination. Looks so cool. Would love to have that in my collection. Would really like to paint that, but given that it doesn't really add anything mechanically, it's just for looks, I think I'm okay missing out.
Yeah.
But boy, is it a regret.
Oh yeah. I'm already regretting not backing Moloch, even at the $1 level, so I can add on later. Like, I'm just like, why did I do that? Like,
yeah. I didn't get everything for Rum and Bones 2 here. With Tides of Second Tide.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to hang on to it. I don't really understand why I backed it. I'm even hesitant to play the game and the fear that I'll enjoy it.
Yeah.
I don't have room for this in my collection. So my intention is to probably sell it off.
Okay.
But I'd like to play it once. Maybe somebody else's copy.
Yeah. You can play my copy.
It's interesting. A fear of enjoyment.
Yeah. Well, no, that's a good point, though. I mean, that's a total real thing. I mean, that says something about the state of the board game industry that, usually it'd be like, okay, well, I'm afraid I'm not going to like this game. But now it's like, no, I'm afraid I'm going to like this. And I'm going to have to find either the investment of time, either to play it, the investment of time if I want to paint it, the investment of money to organize it, to facilitate play, to buy expansions. Because at certain points, like, okay, well, in for a penny, in for a pound. Yeah. So that's the thing.
So I ended up in the situation with Scythe. I was given a copy of Scythe for Christmas from someone very special, and knew that if I was going to be in that game, I needed to be in it all the way. So the retail version of Scythe compared to the Kickstarter exclusive version of Scythe, there's significant differences. Component quality, actual metal coins. There's the combat wheels. There's a bunch of promo cards. There's a lot of stuff that comes in that box. So, of course, I didn't back Scythe. And then to turn the retail copy into the Kickstarter copy, I went down the same road that was just discussed of trying to hunt down the rest of that stuff. MeepleSource was happy to receive my money and has these packages to basically upgrade your retail version of Scythe into the Kickstarter version. So there's at least where there was a pathway, I didn't have to hunt for the stuff. But that didn't mean there wasn't an associated cost with getting to where I'd like that game to sit. So, I mean, that's one of those, you use the phrase I was going to use, so I'll switch. If you're going to be a bear, be a grizzly. So, no half measures for a game you're going to like.
Well, something I like about Stonemaier games is that there are no true exclusives, right? They're promos that were freely available in your Kickstarted copy. So I backed Scythe. I have all the cool stuff that you've paid MeepleSource for, and I just paid Stonemaier for it. I like that it's available, right? Because if I do miss out on it, it doesn't give me the heartburn that like CMON does,
right?
Where it's just not going to be available to me at a price that I can really justify.
Right. There are some games that I will say, okay, I'm just going to wait till retail because I'm not impressed with the exclusives, or I'll say, I'd rather wait to, get this at a discount. Rory will give it to me for a discount, or if he can't get it, then, Cool Stuff will have it for a discount. Where I don't necessarily have a lot of investment in seeing the game made. Like, oh yeah, I'd like to play this and this looks good. If it happens, great. If not, there's going to be 15 other games I can play in its place. So I'm fine with that. And so, for example, Gloomhaven, which is a big regret, I didn't back because I'm like, there's not much in the way of Kickstarter exclusives. I'll just wait for retail. And Rory ordered 8 copies and got 2 in. So that's problematic.
That particular game, the value of booking it in that Kickstarter is ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's going to come out another Kickstarter again, I believe, is the plan. And something tells me the price point is not going to be the same.
Oh, he should absolutely raise it. And not from a demand perspective, but just from a fact that I think there's too much in there, even at $100 or 100, even at 120 retail, right? There's still tremendous value in that box.
Wasn't the Kickstarter number like 75 or 80?
Yeah, it was.
I can't believe he made money off that Kickstarter. In fact, he might have lost money.
He might have.
But that's an example of no exclusives. But if you had backed it at that price point, you were getting an amazing deal.
Yeah.
But I'm less troubled by that, because if I want to get Gloomhaven in, I guess, August now, maybe September, that's a thing that can happen for me at a reasonable price. We're not talking like I have Blood Rage. I bought it through retail. I waited. I did not kickstart it. Getting the Wild Boar Clan is something I'd really like to do. It's going to cost me $200 to get, 5 miniatures?
No, 8. you get
you also get the
10,
sculpted
12.
first player token and some cool
you need
stuff.
You need that.
Yeah, I need it. So even though it's going to be more expensive, it's not that much of a loss. You're not talking hundreds of dollars for a couple pieces of plastic.
Yeah. So looking at some of these individual questions, Jesse Metcalf kind of answered some of them. Are there projects you back because you don't want to miss out on exclusives? He said, CMON is like a pusher when it comes to Kickstarter exclusives. If you like a CMON product, you almost feel coerced to back their latest game in that series or miss out on hundreds of dollars of cool things that will never be printed again. That really sinks for those CMON fans who miss the Kickstarter for whatever reason. That being said, I do like Kickstarters that offer something to backers for their money up front and faith in the creator. A small exclusive expansion or accessory is a nice gesture without making the retail buyers feel like they're missing out on a core part of the game. And then for the question, when do you prefer to wait until retail? There's a lot of risk analysis involved. What will I get for backing a project and putting money on the line versus waiting to see this product at my friendly local game store? If the game is not significantly cheaper or offers some perk for being a Kickstarter backer, I am more likely to wait. And then the last question is, how much are you willing to pay for exclusive items from the aftermarket? For him, it's not much. If they don't add significant value or replayability to the game, they aren't worth much to me. So, for example, all the Kickstarter goodies for Scythe are cool, but he's not going to go out of his way to pay more money than retail for any of them, because he says the retail copy of Scythe plays just fine. And that's true, but I mean, I also see your point, and as someone who backed Scythe and backed the deluxe version, I'm happy I did.
Yes, so, the deluxe version's amazing.
Yeah. But yeah, the retail game plays just fine. Like, and it's a great experience, and it's still great components, but yeah. I mean, we definitely need to put, hashtag first world problems surrounding this entire conversation. The fact that we're all in a position to be able to do this and afford this and is nice. But
this is not an issue that keeps me up at night.
Yeah. Maybe initially when I first played Arcadia Quest, like, I need all these things.
Well, now that we got Inferno, I have so many heroes.
Oh yeah,
it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it really doesn't matter at this point.
So if I can mention just we've talked about traditional board games here. The LCG format for games really sort of pokes into this sort of disorder, proclivity, where, yes, a lot of these LCG games that we all play, whether it's Android Netrunner, Arkham Horror, the Lord of the Rings, those can be easily played in the base set. But if you have this sort of completionist mentality, now you're on the hook for like a continual funding stream to stay up with all the stuff that's released for it. So that to some extent can get even more expensive than doing a Kickstarter exclusive backing sort of setup when you're talking about now I'm constantly buying these $15, $20, $30 additions to the game to keep it complete. So your game that was complete last quarter is now not complete this quarter.
That pulls at my heartstrings.
Well, and then we're not even talking about the completionist nature of CCGs or Star Wars Destiny. I mean that couldn't be a whole topic in and of itself, so I won't quite go down that path. But yeah,
there's a reason I'm a recovering CCG addict.
Yes,
and I think Sean is probably mostly off the sauce.
Well, Destiny's a thing.
That's why I say mostly off the sauce.
And then every couple years, I'm going to get back into Magic for a couple months. I mean, mostly just limited play, like sealed deck or drafting. But
first hits free.
There's always the possibility that I'm going to jump back into standard for a year. Like that's always, like, especially when Chewie gets older, like that's probably been the thing that's kept me from it, is just Chewie being, young and a toddler and whatnot. So that's always there. That's always the demon that's haunting me.
I know that when I was younger, the restrictive means to that CCG addiction was the fact, high school kid.
Yeah.
You only have so much money to spend on games and fun stuff.
Yeah.
If I was in that now, that would be traumatic to my bank account.
Yeah. Yeah, it would be pretty terrible. The problem with many Kickstarters is that I, as a backer, assume most of the risk and shoulder the financial heft by backing. I'm effectively pre-ordering a game a year or more ahead of time, and about half the time I end up paying more than what I would have paid if I'd waited to buy the game at Cool Stuff or Miniature Market. Therefore, to persuade me to back a project, I need one of four things. So, number one, either exclusive content. So CMON, The Fallen, Seventh Continent, he gives us examples. Number two, exclusive discounted pricing. So sometimes you'll see that in deluxe games. Like I'm sure Tokaido Deluxe is probably discounted significantly. Three, the game will be hard to find after the Kickstarter campaign. Seventh Continent is an example. Gloomhaven is an example. Or four, I want to support the game company or designer. For him, he lists small box games and Van Ryder games. And I think that's true too. Like Ryan Lockett games, like I'm willing to kickstart those because I like what he does. I'm willing to support him there.
Or Daily Magic, like we're
right. Yeah, exactly.
So Chris Holmes says, exclusives don't matter so much to me. Mainly, I back games I want to get them to the market. Millennium Blades is a great example. All the added content was a really nice bonus, but it wasn't what drove me to back it in the first place. So Chris is a bit better about his acquisition.
Well, we could say that, but Chris also owns probably more games than all of us combined.
That's probably true.
And he does bling out the copies that he has.
That is true.
So he basically adds Chris exclusive components
Yes.
to a lot of his games, which are amazing quality.
Yeah.
All right, from Tiger Mom. I've only kickstarted 3 board games, and all of them came with some upgrades or deluxe components. I only buy a game if it's by a company who's delivered games on Kickstarter before and has a good reputation. However, I'd like to buy something small and take a chance on a cheaper game if the investment isn't over $15. Really, I like to play all of my games, and I don't like speculating on what I might enjoy. So that being said, I'm very grateful to have friends who kickstart games so I can see what the newest, coolest thing is as well.
Well, she definitely falls in the Alex camp there.
So I definitely agree with that sentiment of backing a game because you think you might enjoy it. So there's some hesitancy there, and I definitely share that feeling.
Yeah. And then I have a similar kind of price point where if a game's under like $30, I'm much more likely to back it. When I see, a card game and it's like, oh, $25 plus $4 shipping, cool. Like, like Food Truck Champion. I almost said Food Chain Magnate. But when a similar game is like $40, then I'm a little bit hesitant. In fact, I had some hesitancy with Importer-Exporter or Import-Export, right? But I still wound up doing it, which was kind of the exception because it looked really cool, sounded really cool. But for the most part, yeah, a certain price point. It's just interesting. It's like, okay, up to $30, yeah, much more likely. And then there's like a $30 to $100 level where I'm very hesitant. And then it's like, oh, well, here CMON jumps in. So, okay, I'm good.
I mean, if you get this game in your hands for a total cost of under $25, even if it turns out to be a total flop, you didn't lose a whole lot. And you can probably sell it to somebody for $5 and get a couple of bucks back.
So that's something that's fun about going to cons is sometimes you get to play games that are about to kickstart or maybe on Kickstarter. Last year at Gen Con, I got the opportunity to play Coldwater Crown, which was on Kickstarter right at that time from Bellwether Games. And immediately at the table while we were playing it with the designer, I went ahead and backed it. And I'm really looking forward to that delivering here soon.
So Megan Naxer, she has some categories of her own similar to what Scott Sexton did. So some of those categories that she is more likely to back, Vital Lacerda, especially some of those deluxe versions of the games, little games like Motainai, Herbaceous, the Tiny Epic Galaxies, Beyond the Black. Richard Brees stuff, she likes her Key stuff, Keyflower and the different expansions and other versions. And then she has an interesting category here, glorified pre-orders. So Santorini, Millennium Blade, Scythe. Yes, I could have waited for a retail release. No, I didn't really need the Kickstarter goodies. But in all 3 cases, I knew I was going to enjoy the game, probably wanted the Kickstarter extras, and didn't want to wait for a retail copy to show up. With Millennium Blaze as an example, by the time we played it and realized how much we loved it, most retail copies and all of the FLGS copies were sold out. We managed to pick up the retail version of the base game online and happily backed the expansion on Kickstarter so we didn't miss it again and got the extra goodies we knew we would enjoy. I just went through all of the cards for the Millennium Blades expansion. Oh man, I'm so excited. I'm super. Oh, well, not all of them. Yeah, sorry. So Nick just held up. There are the decks 4, 5, and 6, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there's shrink-wrapped copies of Millennium Blade expansions on the desk, so I had to call Sean out.
It's not the big expansion, but it's all over there, and it's amazing. I'm super excited for it. All right, so I think what kind of drives us is the fear, right? The fear of not having something amazing or not being able to find it. And I don't know what that says about us as people, because, I mean, I could never buy okay, put the podcast aside, right? I could never buy another game again, and I will have tons of entertainment for the rest of my life. But I like the new stuff, and I like knowing that I have everything I need for everything that I need and want. And I've always been, at least in some way, shape, or form, a collector. Whether it was Magic, like, yeah, I played competitively, but I also like knowing, oh, I just completed my Fallen Empire set. Yeah, that's right, Fallen Empires. Because, yeah, that's the thing. Oh, what a terrible set.
I had a full set of that as well.
Yeah. I was, for the longest time, and this was back when it was out, I couldn't open the last card I needed, which was an Elven Farmer, or Elvish Farmer.
Yeah, the one that's 2/5. But yeah.
And
hey guys, no one cares.
I could never find it. And finally, it was like my 15th birthday, and my mom bought the single for me, and I was like, "Yes, it's done." But I probably opened like 8 boxes of Fallen Empires.
Oh my god!
Yeah.
So that's the only Magic set I ever remember that was being routinely sold under retail.
Yeah. Yeah, I got them super cheap.
Because it was over anyway.
Yeah, and it was a terrible set.
It was a terrible set.
Anyway, the point there is that yeah, this is a weird thing. Jeff Epner, to kind of close this out, says, and talking about the fear, right? And the regret, I mean, maybe regret might be a better word, that at some point we're going to regret something. I've only kicked myself for not backing 3 games, Blood Rage, Scythe, and Orleans. How much would I spend to track down the exclusives of those 3 games? A lot. I got everything from Scythe through 3 different channels. I overpaid for a deluxe version of Orleans, and I overpaid for some of the Blood Rage exclusives. The completionist in me will get the rest eventually. I can't have my Meeple Realty insert having empty placeholders. Good point there. Most other games, I won't care, and the base game is enough. My advice, back less, prefer retail, and bet on great publishers. And I think that's some good advice. Advice that I probably won't follow anytime soon, but I think it's a solid advice. All right, well, let's wrap up this episode. Before we do, real quick, let's give you the episode title runners up. First, Jimmy, DM90, he said, come on, man, no more terrible exclusives. It's Jimmy, it's terrible. It was.
I mean, he got it all in there.
No, you got it all in there. Excellent effort. Just wanted to point it out. But yeah, that's a mouthful to say the least.
Yeah, Ned Meyer came out with, and I don't want to miss a thing.
Wait.
No, that was so bad.
No, okay, hold on. I'm not even going to comment on the quality of the vocals, but the tune was something completely different.
I don't know.
Just like continually rising in pitch throughout the sentence.
I was inspired.
So he did post that with a snippet from the music video on the Guild.
Yeah, the Aerosmith song, what was that? The Armageddon soundtrack?
Yeah. I'm no Steven Tyler.
Yeah, well, yeah.
All right, so Jesse Metcalf came in with Dungeons and Backers.
Neil Hoffman with Wits and Mages, kind of like Wits and Wagers. So I think that makes a decent amount of sense.
And finally, Jeff Eppner recommended Backing Morra.
Yeah, which also makes sense. And once again, thanks to Jeff for helping out with the show notes every week. He has been awesome. All right. Well, let's end this episode. It's long. We ran out of space on the SD card because it was so long. Not really. I mean, we did, but not anyway.
And we got to talk to Alex.
Yeah, we got to talk to Alex. This was a good episode.
I serenaded you guys.
You did something. There was something that you did. I mean, when you have me criticizing you, like that's not a good thing.
Yeah,
because it
was bad.
People have heard my singing.
I also messed up the intro in a now classic way.
Yeah. What would you say? Coming from you to the Duchy under Albuquerque.
Pronouns.
Forever and amen.
Rolling dice and taking names. Nope, that's not the show. Wrong show. Guys, thanks again for joining me. You're now 2 times on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Nope, it's fun pleasure as always.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to have you back, and I'm sure before Alex gets back, we'll probably see you both again in some way, shape, or form.
Can do. Look forward to it.
All right, well, that's going to do it then for episode 133, The Morra, the Merrier. Thanks again, Steve O'Rourke, the name father, for his 15th naming of the show. Probably not. I'd have to check. Alex handles all that. So, but congrats. Until next time, this is Sean.
And Nick. And Jeremy.
And Hail Hydra. Thank you so much for listening to the Dukes of Dice. Today's episode was recorded in the Duchy on March 4th, 2017. Our theme music is provided by Carbohydro M from his Prime Legacy album. The Dukes of Dice are a proud member of the Dice Tower Network. For other great board gaming podcasts, check out DicetowerNetwork.com. And for all the latest in the Duchy, go to DukesofDice.com. Find us on Twitter at Dukes of Dice, join in conversations in our Board Game Geek Guild, find us on Facebook, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks to Guild member Jeff Eppner for production assistance, and thanks to our sponsors, Tasty Minstrel Games and Meeple Realty. Check out their awesome titles at PlayTMG.com, and for high-quality board game inserts, check out MeepleRealty.com. Think inside the box. We'll see you back here next week. Until then, as Alex would say, game on!
I gotta pee so bad.